a few days ago, it was Ashura, which is a important date in the Islamic calendar. People think it's particularly important for Shia Muslims, but it's actually significant for all Muslims. I have on the line with me Mac, friend of the show. He is a Muslim. Mac, what type of Muslim are you?
Well, I would be honest and say a non-practicing one.
Okay, that's very honest of you. Well, we're all somewhere on the spiritual spectrum, but your heritage lies in Shia Islam, correct?
Well, in both. My dad obviously converted to Shiism as well, yeah.
Oh wow! So you got mixed heritage in your family. What did the period of time Ashura mean to your? In fact, let's start at the beginning. What does Ashura actually mean? There may be people watching this who have no clue what it means.
Ashura, I think I'm not actually, it's to mourn, I think.
Okay.
It's,
Well,
it's a time of mourn.
it's a time of mourning, and the Shias mourn the Battle of Karbala. From the name Ashura, I'm getting the number 10. Ashra, as in 10.
Yeah, that, that's because the events that I took, you could say the demise of the grandson of the Prophet came on the 10th. Now, the events, the build up to it was a 10-day event, but the reason why as well is Ashura is because it occurred on the 10th, which I believe was yesterday.
Okay. And the typical association people have with it is that Shia Muslims harm themselves or hit themselves, and yeah. Why does that happen?
No.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, now I'm gonna have to go back to references to Jacob now. This is where we're gonna reference his son later, but Jacob, we're talking about someone who, in his form of way of mourning, was to cry over his son, who he believed his brothers had told him that was eaten by a wolf. However, after, as we know it to be, the story, he was living like a king as like Pharaoh, like the Pharaoh was. Okay, now he was crying himself to blindness, right? This is Prophet Jacob or Yaqub or whatever you want to call it. So this in itself is not exactly beating his chest, but it's a mourning. Now, he would not beat his chest. He had Allah didn't instruct him, or God did not, or Yahweh did not instruct him to stop the mourning, because it's not. It's a you could say it's an affection that he had, or emotion, more or less. Now, we try to do the same emotions. Now, we might be a bit more elaborate. Now, as I said, each sects differ. Now, you have the Afghanis, where they chain themselves with these sharp edges as well. Then you got the Iraqis, who use they call either a dagger or a sword, and they do qama. It's called qama. Mm-hmm. And then Iranians, obviously, the main one is when they beat their chest, as in to try and. Now, it's the equivalent as Yaqub was crying. Now, imagine this. We're beating ourselves for not just anyone. We're talking about the character who Rasulullah, in the middle of his khutbah, would get up, chase around, because he was still in his infant years, kiss him in his neck, kiss on the forehead. This is the character that was, you can say, now, not only was just mutilated, but his family as well. Now, the build up to the 10 days of Karbala is he was deprived from not just food, but the main essential of necessities, which is water.
Now, look, the parallels here, you've already mentioned Jacob or Yaqub. There are other parallels with stories from the Bible, right?
Of course. I mean, you can. There are a lot of characters that show suffering as a way of. Well, you could say just like Jesus, for example, was not. I mean, obviously, giving in to his beliefs, he stood up because of his beliefs against tyrants, against injustice people. This is the same scenario now. The only difference we would say Hussein had provided was, I mean, is because seeing your own son having an arrow at 6.5-month-old son, he took out to the battlefield, said, "Look, don't give me water, at least give the infant water." And instead of water, they shot it through its throat with an arrow.
And this is where
this is something that.
Go on, mate.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say the parallels with.
You can't make that kind of comparison in that sense, but you can say in the sense that Jesus was willing to put a stance and give his life for it, just like Hussein was not going to give his bay'ah, or that he was not going to basically say or agree to all the tyranny that Yazid was doing, all the corruption, all the wrongdoings. He didn't want to affiliate with that, so therefore he did not want to. This is where he was willing to give his life, just like Jesus was, to stand up against wrongdoers.
Okay, and this is the point here, the willingness to sacrifice everything. Jesus, whether you believe he died on the cross or something else happened, he was willing.
The intention
he was willing.
Are the same, equivalent. Now, the only difference is Jesus did not have a son, whereas he did. He had nephews. He had a brother who tried to go to the water and then he was they chopped his arm off, then chopped his other arm off. Then he was trying to grab the jug of water or the bag of water with his mouth, and they eventually beheaded him. This is Abbas, the half brother of Hussein, from the same father, but obviously not from Fatima alayhi salam, obviously from a different mother.
The bottom line here is people marched into battle knowing that they would lose, but it had to be done. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Okay. It was they knew, even at the night before Ashura, so on the 9th night, he gave a khutbah. They said that Imam Hussein gave a khutbah. At the end of it, they obviously sit around the campfire, but they put the fire out and said, just understand, your life will be taken tomorrow on the battlefield. However, if you have any regrets now, you can leave while it's dark, so you don't have to be humiliated in that way. So you don't feel ashamed to up and leave. So now, so even Hussein he knew that obviously certain people will realize that this character cannot be by himself. So no matter what happened, there were 72 people that stayed firm with him.
What a number, 72. This one keeps coming up. There's lots of numbers and symbology, the number 12.
But we have 72 specific numbers that we can actually, because what it was, Yazid got, Shem was the actual person on the field. And at them times, they would have someone to write down the events that were occurring on the battlefield. And obviously Shem had someone who was writing down who was mutilated, what names, and these names that were with all the Sahabas of Hussein weren't just normal people. They were warriors that were toe to toe. Some of them were even Sahabas with the Rasulullah. So it's where the religion, obviously Islam, it becomes un-Islamic.
And is this the moment that Islam split into Sunni and Shia?
No, the Sunni and Shia had split from the moment the Prophet had deceased because while Ali was burying, they were making elections on who to be the Khalifa.
Okay.
So that was way before then anyway. It reached to the point where he wanted, because he knew, it was, put it this way, in these nowadays terminology we'd say, street credibility. So he knew that Hussein was a prophet's son, a grandson, and what character he is, and who Ali was. And Ali was only able to be taken down, not in the battlefield, but only during his prayer. So to be able to take the son of Asadullah, they used to call him, Ali, to the son of Asadullah, to take him down is a form of, like, you could say, under my belt, I killed the son of Asadullah. That's the way that Yazid would view it.
So Yazid is obviously the villain in this story, certainly from a Shia perspective. All Muslims love the Ahlul Bayt, the family.
Idea is the Umayyads. Umayyads we get against the Hashemites. Now, what it was before, when Imam Hassan dies and Imam Ali dies, with Muawiyah, they make a treaty that once Muawiyah was to pass away, that it's not to be passed down to his son shouldn't get the heirs or shouldn't be the successor. And as Yazid did step up to the plate, they broke the treaty. And Imam Hussein was standing saying, look, you've not only broken the treaty, but you stand for all wrongdoers as well.
Okay. So how do the Sunnis, I mean, I hate to get into sectarian language, but Sunnis obviously make excuses, or some make excuses for the likes of Muawiyah and Yazid, or do they think they were righteous? Because all Muslims revere Ali and the Ahlul Bayt and Hassan and Hussein. There's no Sunni Muslim who can't say, I like, yeah.
Juncture, I would say that Sunnis and Shias would see it in the same sort of lens. If they claim to have the same love for Rasulullah, then understand that head that was beheaded, or that neck that was obviously was the neck that Rasulullah used to kiss. So if you're gonna disrespect something that Rasulullah used to not only play with, spend time with, but kiss from head to toe, and you know, have the grandfather and child-like relationship. You know how you tickle them around the sides and you make them laugh, you chase them around. This is someone who Rasulullah used to play with. I mean, okay. And this.
So it's just a case that the Sunnis don't give this event as much significance as the Shia, who seem to, some of them, base their whole sort of doctrine upon it, if that's fair to say.
I believe there is mourning on both sides, because if they're claiming to love the Rasulullah, they will be at obviously in pain as well. Now, to highlight, we don't say Hussein, we say Imam Hussein, not Khalif. So now, when you're gonna use that terminology, then yes, the whole school of thought changes, the whole ideology changes. Like now, you're being a bit more, you're deciding to be what's secular and what's not. That's when, and you're going beyond or before his death, where the division between the Sunni and the Shia begin. But when it comes to Hussein, there is no Sunni Shia, because they both love Rasulullah, both sides, and because of that, they are both lovers of Hussein in one way or another. So that's why there isn't a divide because of him. It was before him anyway.
Okay. Wow. I want to talk about the parallels with the Bible. I've got Karbala on the screen and also Exodus.
Oh, yes.
So
Exodus.
This is something that predates what happened at Karbala, and Ashura was significant to the Muslims before. Okay, it's just the case that Karbala coincided with that period of time, if I'm absolutely correct. And the Prophet, or someone brought it to the attention of the Prophet that the Jews fast on that day, remembering when they came out from Egypt. And he said, we love Moses just as much as the Jew, or Moses is even more significant to us as he is to Jewish people. So it's not a new thing.
Make this distinction. We Muslims believe that obviously Allah had to use Jibril to communicate with our Prophet Muhammad, as we say, who is the dear little Prophet. However, we do believe that, even as a Muslim, that God spoke directly to Moses.
Okay.
So this is something, not to give Moses a higher maqam or a higher hierarchy or position, but just to say that obviously it doesn't matter whether you're getting it from an angel called Jibril or Gabriel, or whether you're talking to God himself like Moses. But the fact of the matter is, we won't deny that that miracle that Moses had, or connection that he had with Allah, which obviously we can't speculate how close Muhammad and Allah were, but every message that came to Muhammad came through Jibril, not directly through a burning bush. Or do you see what I'm saying?
Interesting. Okay, interesting. Also, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe someone in the chat will know, it is said that this was the period when Noah's Ark finally survived the flood. Have you heard that before?
It couldn't have been at the same time as...
I don't mean the same exact time, but the time of year, or it's the time that's also remembered. I mean, we don't celebrate Christmas exactly when Jesus was born, but it's the day when we remember when he was born. Mac, are you happy to take a call?
Yes.
I'm hoping you're going to hear it. Hello, caller. Who's this?
Hello?
Hi, you're through to Mac, and we're talking Ashura.
Thank you. Happy Ashura to you and all.
I don't think we say happy Ashura. Who's calling, by the way?
My name's Triple T. I'm quite
welcome back, Triple T. I don't think we say happy Ashura because it's Matt can explain it.
Well, you don't say happy morning in a wake, do you? You don't go to someone's wake and say happy mornings.
Well, it depends if you're celebrating their life. But I beg your pardon. I said
minor detail. Sorry, Triple T. Go on.
No, I'm sorry. I understand the sensitivity. My question to your guest, to Mac, good evening, Mac. My question to you is, do you endorse this self kind of flagellation, this self kind of harming thing that I see people on the streets? There was a case where a young 13-year-old was handed a whip by his dad that kind of had these tiny blades, and he used that on his back and even on his head, and that landed the father into jail, and I don't know how long he was jailed for. I'm sure you know of similar stories. If you don't know of that story, my first question to you is, do you endorse this? Is this what you do? Are you a part of this?
No. Well, first of all, at the beginning of the call, I don't know if you caught, I said I'm not a practicing Muslim to begin with. I did say that. And
you're a believer, right, Matt? You believe in it, but you're a bit rusty. Is that fair to say?
I'm not a practicing Muslim. I don't really pray as I should be. As you see, I'm not exactly a Muslim in the true sense of.
The fact that you acknowledge that you should suggests to me that you're a man of faith. But go on.
I'm a man. I try to be a man of wisdom, if anything. If anything, you can summarize me in that sense. But to answer his question, again, it's like Yaqub or Jacob crying for a son that is living like a pharaoh. Now, we may beat our chests or use chains that are really sharp, and as you say, it depends on the tribe. That's more Afghani, Pakistani, perhaps. They tend to do that as well. Whereas the Iraqis, they use blades. They kind of use a dagger or a sword on top of their head. So depending on which tribe you're talking of Shiism, the ideology existed before that, because you have certain Christians doing the same rituals as Jesus went through, going through the same flagellations.
That's true. If you've seen it in the Philippines, they put themselves on the cross, don't they?
Mexico.
And Mexico.
Very, very, very popular practice out there.
Wow.
So it's
well,
not just sorry.
I understand. Yeah. I'm not too sure on where you stand. So my question for you was that where do you stand in the year 2020? Do you think that this is something that we should leave in the past, leave it for the people before, as you said, the time, the Christians and so on, other people who did this? Should we leave it back there, or should we continue this ritual on an annual basis?
If it's a point of where it's afflicting unnecessary injuries or problems, which if you can bring anyone that says that I've suffered with this disease, or I've gained this or this problem from, then that's fine. It should be highlighted. But if they are doing it in a sense that, it's just like how Jesus was whipped and how he had to carry the cross. I mean, maybe Hussein didn't obviously use a sword against his head, but the ideology is, the more passionate that you are about him, the probably higher stakes that you take in. I don't know, in the flagellation department. I personally can't talk from experience in the sense that I don't, maybe I've beat my chest once or twice, but that's the maximum I'd do. But I wouldn't exactly inflict any sort of marks or use a chain with a dagger at the end of it, or any sort of dagger or sword. I don't see Imam Hussein wanting us to do that. But the point is, he would want his story to be revealed to the world. Now, if it means gaining attention in a notorious way, so be it, but it needs to be highlighted. If it means that certain Muslims have to beat their chests, then that's drawing attention to the story.
Beating your chest is one thing on the streets, but as you can see all over the internet and beyond, you can see even young kids are now kind of like dabbing these blades and whipping themselves, and I think it's dangerous.
Not everyone, Triple T, and as you heard from Matt there, he's personally against it. In the chat, Dardasha is saying, I'm just against self-harm. You can be upset and pray and what have you, but please, no self-harm. There's the voice of reason.
I agree with that. I actually agree with that comment.
Triple T, we're going to free up the line. Thank you for your call.
Thank you, mate.
All right.
Okay, I was gonna.
Go on. You can. Well, I'm sure he's still listening. Go on, Mac. Come back at him.
Yeah, I mean, my personal beliefs, just to answer him directly. Yeah, I just like your comment, your last comment. As I said, if you're doing something that's causing a problem for you, or an illness, or it's problematic, then no, it's not right. Imam Hussein, why would he want you to suffer for what he's already suffered?
I think it is difficult for people to get past this imagery of the self-flagellation. As you've said tonight, there's so much more to it, and even historical events behind it that are long before that.
This is why I tell my friends sometimes about AA meetings and stuff. Sometimes I say, looking at history, Jesus and even just listening. I mean, you can go to AA meeting, hear someone's and their lives and ups and downs, but here we have someone factual that apparently, now whether it be Jesus or Imam Hussein, even if it's a parable, even if it's still, but the sad part is, for it to gain the attention it requires, if it means to taking the extra flagellations or beating your chest, because it's an event that doesn't want to, it basically doesn't want to be forgotten. Now, even if it has to mean that people would have to beat themselves as a reminder, oh, that's the time of year when so and so type of Muslims. Well, again, fine. If you're going to be saying that for a couple of years to yourself, but if you really want to find out why they do it, find out the story, look into it. It's not about the beating. It's just trying to get your attention to, if you can get to, just for people to be curious onto why, and to come to any one of these majlis, to sit down to hear what Imam Hussein, and let them decide for themselves. I mean, at the end of the day, we don't actually have 12-year-olds being admitted to hospital for self-flagellations. I mean, it would hit the news. I mean, this kind of story, I'm surprised that it hasn't hit the news. How he's saying that there was a 12-year-old kid, and then his dad was locked up for him. This is something that should be highlighted if that is the case. But was the kid actually really hurt?
Well, we need sources on that one. Maybe someone can post it in the comments, a link to any genuine news story where something like that.
If a 12-year-old kid decides to go pick up a cigarette and smoke, yeah, but decides to come to Ashura, a majlis, and to go through a flagellation phase a couple of hours. I mean, it's his choice. It's a 12-year-old's choice. I mean, he can either be selling drugs, or he could be playing football, or he could be doing the righteous thing. It's all depends on the person as well. And obviously, if the father he's not condemned, well, he seems like to condone it. Okay, fine, but he doesn't see it being problematic. He grew up doing the same thing, and he realized it didn't really cause him any issues. And if it hasn't caused him any issues, so if he allows his son, 12-year-old son, that decides that he wants to do it, and not go meet his friends down the road and smoke weed or take a couple of lines or whatever they do, you see what I mean?
Safer than smoking,
because he has this belief or this faith in obviously Hussein, but again, it's open for interpretation.
And you said it could be a parable. Do you think it's been plagiarized, this story? We talk about history repeating itself. There are,
because the both from both sides of sources exists such story. When you go to Damascus, you go to the mosque where they put Imam Hussein's head, and
well, that's reminiscent of, there you go, John the Baptist. John the Baptist's head is in Damascus as well.
Exactly.
Is this divine prophecy? Is this people wanting prophecy to be fulfilled? How does it end up happening again and again?
It goes back to street credibility. Having so-and-so's head next to you raises your credibility if you're a jahiliya or a what's the English term for jahili?
If you're in ignorance. An ignorant one. Yeah. Even, what about going the other way? I wonder, have people heard this story? I've heard that there are even areas of India that are not even Muslim, but the local people celebrate Ashura. Is it India? I hope I'm getting that right. Or possibly, maybe even in the Caribbean, there are places where it's celebrated, because some of the indentured servants brought the traditions with them, and now there are non-Muslims who celebrate Ashura as kind of a cultural event, but they do remember the story. That's the impact that it's had on some people. I think it's in the Caribbean. think I'm right in saying that.
It could be possibly in the Caribbean, because in India, I do know Muslims are being, because of the Hindu and Muslims do not go hand in hand.
Not when there's Hindu nationalism, Hindutva, and Modi going on. It's not a very pluralistic society at the moment, India. We used to hear from a lot of Indians on this show, not so many anymore.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but going back, so yeah, it's just about getting the message out there now. If just beating your chest, because telling Hussein's story is just like going to AA. It could be just any old story, but when you have a little beat, if a group of sects of Muslims are showing a bit more emotion than normal, then you got to think, all right, I got to look at this under a microscope a bit more, because why are they? What's triggering them to do this or feel this way, or triggering their emotions in this way? That's all we have to. I mean, so it's the same as what triggered Yaqub for him to cry himself to blindness. What triggers that?
Raw emotion, I imagine. Another
same answer you'd get from every person that would probably go to Imam Hussein Majlis and beat themselves or do some sort of flagellation of some sort.
I mean, callers like Triple T are very quick to point out the self-harm that's being done, but isn't fasting a form of self-harm? Fasting damages your body. If you fast long enough, it can kill you. Well, if it's done in moderation, but if you fast for long enough, you'll die.
Yeah.
Okay, so could a little bit of a beating on the chest not be as beneficial as intermittent fasting? Do you know what I mean, though? But like, we don't regard that as harm.
They're a bit more emotional. Now, these are just people walking on the streets, but when they hit themselves, is because they hear the thorough stories. Now, apparently, Jesus, even though he was on the cross the whole day, but I'm sure he had a few of his disciples that would get a sponge, put it in a bucket of water, and try and moisten his lips every so often, right? Am I wrong in picturing the synopsis?
That is correct.
Okay, now, Imam Hussein was deprived in the middle of the desert for 10 days straight with no water.
Wow. Can I just say, on the screen, Give Peace a Chance has said that Muhammad said that travel was a form of torture. Interestingly enough, don't know if we've got a quote for that one or a source. Travel is a form of torture. It can be. Depends who you've got in the car with you.
Well, if you're a hunter, you're a lot more likely to survive than if you're just a normal, any ordinary slave.
Buddha says all life is suffering. Maybe we're meant to suffer. Maybe we're suffering here so we don't suffer in the next life. I don't know.
Stoicism only came around I think in the 3rd century, but the thing is, Stoicism is something it's a belief that you're meant to endure hardship, but
if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. I mean, these are all cliches, but we get the element of truth, and it's across every culture. I think it's always different when you're looking at someone else's culture through your own lens. Obviously, beating yourself looks strange to those that have never engaged in it. If you grow up with it and you understand the reason behind it, maybe it's not so strange. But smoking is self-harm. Eating a McDonald's is self-harm. Going to bed late is self-harm. We harm ourselves in so many ways, but we want to point fingers. Like Jesus said, when you have a plank in your own eye, don't point out the speck in somebody else's eye. So don't be such a hypocrite next time, Triple T. Although maybe I'm hypocritical myself.
Sure, what I'm seeing on the screens is a lot of signs of X against Iranian troops.
This happened on Ashura, and it's often a time for a political demonstration, right? Ironically, you would think it would be the other way around, but they're also...
This is trying to show you that even though Iran have adapted this day and they obviously...
They've appropriated it.
But we don't agree with it's not an Iranian regime or government philosophy. This predates them before then as well. So again, you can see people are marching there. They're not exactly looking to harm anyone. They're not looking for revenge in that sense. They just want. I mean, this is what Ashura is about. Is the 10th day of suffering, and it's just the marches are for people just being aware of it, not being unaware of what's... I mean, we can all be jahiliya, ignorant, as you said. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's easy. Ignorance is bliss.
It is.
This is why you don't see these people in a state of bliss, because they're not ignorant.
Very good. On the chat, Triple T is saying you are equating having a burger or going to sleep late with beating yourself with a metal whip. I would like to see you try it live on YouTube, please. Well, I won't be eating a burger either. I think I'd rather beat myself with a whip than eat a McDonald's burger. What would you prefer, Triple T? A Big Mac, or would you like to listen to Mac? Or would you want to beat yourself with a metal whip? A lot of sensationalism going on in the chat there.
You don't necessarily need to beat yourself, but
I mean... It doesn't have to be a metal whip. Any whip will do. Right?
The point here is this is where people astray from the actual message itself. They concentrate on the negatives, on why you're beating yourself. But why did Yaqub or Jacob cry himself to no, Allah could have just said, or God could have come down and said, you're crying for a son you're going to later on be reunited with. But Hussein was obviously... It was like he saw his own son being mutilated. He saw his nephew. He saw his half brother. Then himself he was basically. They said when his body on the battlefield was left, he looked like a hedgehog. That many arrows were in him that his body looked like a hedgehog. That's how bad it was.
My goodness.
So as well as that, they were riding up and down on the horses. This is why when you actually look at Imam Hussein's shrine, there's one spot to another spot where that from one side to the other side, minar they call it, from one minar to the other minar, they were running with their horses all over the trampling, all over the bodies of. So it was scattered all over that area in Karbala. So looking at the events that took place, if you don't want to shed a tear, that's your choice. But if you feel emotional and you realize what they've just done to the Prophet Muhammad's grandson, then yeah, shed one tear, show Rasulullah that you actually care. That's what it's about. Just it's not like the fact that we're grouping up to try and get revenge. It's past revenge. It's history don't repeat itself, but he is doomed to repeat it if he does not learn from the history.
100%. Triple T's coming back and telling us that he prefers a Big Mac whilst listening to Mac. By the way, Mac said when people beat themselves with a whip or blade in Iraq, he sees them as more pious. Is this correct, or have I misunderstood?
No, you're just because whoever can bleed the most doesn't become more pious. See, these are all speculations that you can come up with. I've just explained on the degree of sorrow that you have, you get carried away from just beating your chest to whatever they want to do, or however they carry out their mourning. But you can simply just, as I said, tears is enough, because when Jacob or Yaqub was crying, there was no mention of, don't shed a tear. So I don't see the same occurring here as well. Why would Allah say to us not to shed a tear? Why would, just for someone who was mutilated as well?
On the screen, I've got Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah political leader. Do you think this story is easily politicized, and can it be politicized by differing sides? You had people who were against the regime earlier. You might be more sympathetic towards them than Hassan Nasrallah. But is it a story that anyone can reflect on, or do you think some people are missing the point?
It's not a story for a specific group. It's anyone can reflect on, because to some degree we all have problems in our lives, and to realize, because we say out of all the so-called 12 imams, Imam Hussein was mutilated. We call him the Prince of Martyrs. So that in itself should show you that it's not about the 12 imams anymore. It's nothing about that. It's about the grandson of the Prophet, Hussein, how he was treated by the people of the Kufa, saying to them, yes, we will support you, when it was an ambush. It was a straight ambush by the Yazid, and as he went towards Kufa, he was obviously ambushed at Karbala. So he was in Medina, he was, I think, in his pilgrimage, and during his pilgrimage, that's when, he decided to go, because he received a letter from the Kufan people saying that they will back him.
Okay.
But obviously that wasn't the case. He was ambushed.
And bringing it back to the Islamic Revolution, do you know if they mentioned it in any of their rallies prior to it? Was it part of their message? I would imagine it would be something they would draw upon, much like the Easter Rising in 1916 in Ireland. They deliberately coincided it with that because it meant so much to people. You think more so in Iraq?
Well, I would say more so in Iraq than in Iran. But then again, after he passed away, there was a guy called Mukhtar, who was an Iranian, who wasn't too long after the events of Karbala went and got revenge anyway.
Okay.
So it really truly has got nothing to do with that, because after the next of kin of Hussein was, we say, Zain al-Abidin, which was there at the time of Karbala, but he was he was sick to get involved in so he was obviously with the women, but he was held captive as well on this day as well. So as well as the wives and his Zainab was a sister of Hussein, and Ruqayya was his daughter. These two people were held captive. 6-year-old daughter was crying for her dad. Eventually they threw her dad's head at her, and this is a 6-year-old kid just watched her dad being mutilated. So these are the kind of things that we feel a bit more emotional with, and depends on how much attachment you have to Hussein. The more you obviously listen to the story and realize and get the further details, then you realize whether or not it's worth it. And this is not about Imam Hussein. This is Hussein, the son of Prophet Muhammad.
Okay. And all this happened within a few decades of the passing of the Prophet, right? And it happened in Iraq. And to this day, Iraq...
50 years after, 50 or something years after.
Okay. So in the early stages of the religion. And to this day...
It was the beginning of the Umayyad dynasty, well, should we say, yeah. It was the Umayyad versus the Hashemites.
Okay, the Hashemites being the family of the Prophet.
From Khadija.
Okay. And to this day, Iraq is, you could say, 60-40 Shia. Iran next door is seen as the...
Are you talking now or in the last Saddam Hussein decade time?
Will you tell me how's it changed?
Well, can openly go to the grave of Hussein in Karbala, whereas at the time of Saddam, they would have to. It would have been more difficult. They were more prone to attacks from Saddam, because in Wahhabism, they get into. I mean, this is going too depth into why they're killing each other now. But
okay, well, let's bring it up to date. Why is there such tension?
Sorry?
Let's bring it up to date. Why is there such tension, and does it stem from this historic battle?
Deny this day in general, the Salafis, or the Wahhabis, should we say, which is a movement which was made by the Al-Saad family. Mm-hmm. But
it was backed by them. So, but in retrospect, what we're just highlighting is the events that occurred. Now, whether you feel to mourn it or just listen to it, or as people do go flagellation, that's your choice. That's how spiritual of a person you are. It's the same with Christianity. Some people, like in Mexico, it's a must. They go through the same. So it depends on how spiritual you are and how far. But you don't expect that it's like prayer is a wajibat. Doing this flagellation is not a wajibat. It's down to your emotion, just like Yaqub crying and to blindness. That was his emotion. It was not a wajib. There's nothing wajib about that. So, yeah, if anything, maybe I would say, learn a lesson from Yaqub, listen to Imam Hussein's story, no need to hurt yourself, but obviously show the respect of who Imam Hussein, or the grandson of the Prophet, was, and how he was taken and why. And that's it. That's more or less it. And people, instead of going to AA, hearing this person's story, realizing there was a person in history that suffered loss of a son, 6-year-old, from losing brother, nephew to son, to being he wasn't able to get any water for his family for 10 days, not just food. We're talking in the middle of the desert. He was deprived from water. So if you can, again, think of it as nothing and compare it to a Big Mac meal, or which one would you do? Well, that's your choice, because it's the Rasulullah's grandson that you're making a comparison to a sandwich, for example. In that time, the 10 days without water, the talk that you sent me the other day, the Sheikh mentioned Zamzam and this spring that miraculously appeared for Ishmael. Why didn't God intervene in this scenario in the same manner?
Now, the miracle that Ishmael had was a miracle, which was all part of God's. Again, the mother of Ishmael was running through Safwa Marwa, so she was going through some thirst. But it wasn't that long until he tapped on the floors, or the water just sprang up from the floor, or something happened that cracked the floor. So, but yeah, in that situation, Allah had a plan for Ishmael already, and that plan was obviously.
In the Quran, it doesn't mention whether it's Isaac or Ismail. Is that correct?
It doesn't know, but I can say for a fact that it is a sacrifice leaving your son in the middle of a desert. It's the same as trying to cut the head off, because you're still doing it on the faith that you're doing it for something good will come of it.
That is God's will. So
being left in the middle of a desert it's a sacrifice in itself. Do you not see that?
I see that, yeah.
Without water. So when the Quran says sacrifice, it doesn't necessarily mean that it could have been the brother that was sacrificed with the blade. It could have been Isaac. That could have been.
And people do say, oh, the Jews say it was Isaac, the Muslims say it was Ismail, but it's not clear in the Quran.
if logic dictates here, it would make sense, because right now Hajar is told to go to the middle of the desert because Sarah can't handle. She's not having. Obviously because of the boy. So whether you call it jealousy or call it whatnot, she was asked to be removed to Saudi Arabia. Then Sarah was told that she will be given a son. Now, for Prophet Abraham, his son, even though Ishmael was his first son, his son with Sarah was a special son. So for him to wanting to sacrifice that special son it makes more logical sense to me, because not to say that Ishmael wasn't a special son. God had planned for him already, Zamzam awaiting for him there.
So you take the opinion that Isaac is the special one?
Well, not special one, but this is where I say the Palestinians should realize that was one sequence where God is showing us our attention towards Arabia. Then comes the...
I knew we'd get it out of you in the end, Mac. I knew we'd get it out of you in the end. Go on.
Huh?
I knew we'd get it out of you in the end.
Yeah, but it's the same. It's the same. I see it as the same cause. He's trying. Prophet Abraham is trying to get your attention to say, listen, Saudi Arabia, God will provide. He's the best provider. No one can provide as well as he can. So, with that big faith in mind, sacrifice his son there. That's a form of sacrifice itself. So then he comes back to Sarah. Again, he's tested again to sacrifice his beloved son now, because it's with his beloved wife.
Okay. And that is the difference.
Well, yeah, in my opinion. So when Allah says sacrifice, He doesn't mean sacrifice in the sense, but my Arabic's not that well, so I need to look into that. But my logic dictates to me that it would make sense that even leaving your child in the middle of a desert with no water, not knowing that obviously Allah is going to provide Zamzam, that you're just deserting them literally in the middle of the desert. And
that's the sacrifice. Well, Mac, you've sacrificed your evening for us, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. I think next time maybe we will go down the road of Isaac, Ishmael, the two Qiblas, and why you are a hardcore, diehard supporter of Israel based on Islamic reasons. That might be an interesting one.
Not just Islamic, Cyrus the Great as well, but I mean, if he helped the Israelites from Babylon to Jerusalem to build the third temple,
then why can't we?
As well.
Yes, very true. Very true. Technically, yes. All right, Mac, thank you so much. And I don't say happy Ashura, but do I give condolences? What do I say?
People, just please look in your own time if you feel that you want to see why they have these emotions about these days and they feel that they have to hit themselves. Look into the story. Don't try and let that distract you. Look to the story. Look at the story, and then once you've understood the story, maybe you might understand why they had these emotions.
Very well said. Mac, we'll do it all again soon. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for the time, Jenna.
Wonderful. Well, that was Mac, regular contributor to the show. And next time we'll find out why he, although a Muslim and non-practicing by his own admission, is a strong supporter of Israel based on what King Cyrus did and a couple of other things that happened thousands of years ago. This has been Lessons for Life. Sorry we've been away from the live streams for a while, but I appreciate the people that phoned in, that tuned in. Triple T, lovely to hear from you. Sorry for calling you a hypocrite. Thank you to Give Peace a Chance, who corrected the hadith that he shared earlier on. It was Abu Huraira and not the Prophet, apparently. No problem there. And thank you for joining us. This has been Lessons for Life, and we will do it all again soon, in a different time, in a different place. We were here, and we are gone. Laters.